on a sort of a low information basis, like we are, and the amount of propaganda I've seen podcasts where well-known intellectuals that are very kind of well connected to the blob are saying this is not the time to be lawyerly. This is the time to think like a propagandist. Okay,
I got the clip.
Yeah, please play it right now because
that's where we're going.
Play this.
Okay, all right, hang on, it's loading.
How do you fight this thing? Here's the idea that I want to try out. Based on what we know on patrimonialism, the incompetence will take care of itself. Pretty soon people will notice that the administration is chaotic and incompetent. However, one of the things we know is that the public is sensitive to corruption. We saw Navalny was very effective at using corruption against Putin, might in fact have brought him down. We see that the Peace Party in Poland, what brought them down was very largely, not exclusively, relentless focusing on their corruption. This administration will give no shortage of material to argue the case for corruption. So I think the right strategy is, yes, of course, do all that stuff that Galston and Kmark want to do, rebuilding a Democratic Party, moving it toward the center, developing an agenda, and not answering every fire drill with outrage. Fine, do all that. But what also needs to be done is a coordinated, unified, relentless messaging and branding exercise focusing on the corruption of the Trump administration. Every day, every way, you emphasize they are the most corrupt administration in history, unprecedented corruption, corrupt, day in, day out, coordinated, not just in response to the outrage of the day. This is a playbook that Newt Gingrich ran against Jim Wright and the Democrats in the early 90s, and it was effective. They, of course, had far less to go on than Democrats and other opposition figures do against the Trump administration right now. That exercise, I think, would at a minimum dent Trump et al.'s reputation for being, in some sense, the authentic voice of the people.
Okay, so I want to explore this a little bit with you. How it seems to me you would have to talk about a bunch of other things in the language of corruption. So instead of talking about Elon Musk and the cybersecurity risk of letting a bunch of 19 and 20-year-olds giving them the keys to the Treasury Department payment system, you would have to frame that in terms of corruption somehow, which is doable, right? You could say, the richest man in the world has bought access to the payment system at the risk of, significant. But how do you frame, for example, what's going on at USAID or what's going on at FBI in terms of corruption? It seems to me easier to frame in terms of lawlessness, but what's Trump's pecuniary interest in the FBI?
Well, of course, you can talk about corruption in non-pecuniary terms, and that's very true. You can say that Trump is basically turning the government into his personal vehicle for enrichment and power, and he's using it to support his billionaire cronies who paid him spent hundreds of million dollars to elect him. So they're stealing your government. They're putting it in your pocket. The other thing I'd say about that, and you tell me what you think about this, is that this is not the time to think like a lawyer. This is the time to think like a publicist or maybe a propagandist. You
totally agree. Or an activist.
Or an activist, but this is a brand campaign. This is not about technical accuracy, arguing the fine points of the law, and it's also not about making the case to save democracy and the Constitution and the rule of law. This is a relentless branding exercise in which day after day you highlight the corruption of the Trump administration, and they give you plenty to work with. So it is very easy to tell a story about Elon Musk taking control of payment systems in order to profit himself and spending $300 million or whatever it is to elect himself. You can talk about the tax cuts, which are going to go to the very cronies who elected Trump instead of, for example, saving Social Security.
So the person who was the second voice in there was a man named Benjamin Wittes. or Wittes, as some people pronounce it. And he is not an unknown person. So that conversation was not insignificant. That wasn't just two people having a conversation on a podcast. And I'm going to take you through a little journey just of recent history with Benjamin Wittes so that you can understand what role he plays.
Can I say, I think I'm the person that surfaced that clip, and I've started watching this guy's stuff. I don't actually know the history, so I'm looking forward to learning. But it is fucking fascinating, dude. Like, he's got 2 channels, and it's like I found the password to the Zoom calls of Blue Anon. It is unfucking believable.
Yes,
and I mean, material like this, right? And people like Rausch are not random either, right? Like, these are like Sam Harris types, very friendly with David Frum and, DeResta, Applebaum.
If you go look at Brookings Institution alums, you're going to find a lot of assholes.
Anyway, long story short, I got the vibe that this was an important conversation, not because I knew the guy, but because of context from the rest of the conversation, that this was actually actionable stuff. This wasn't like what would we do if we could? It's like, we can, what are we going to do?
So you're going to get I'm going to satisfy your curiosity and give
Very
you this
good.
Historical.
Please. My body is ready.
All right. So we're going to start with a Washington Post article. This is some of it's going to make sense as I fill this out, but we're going to start with this Washington Post article titled, quote, "Is this a thing? Is this a boom? How Washington copes with the insane Trump era news cycle." So we are back in the first administration. Benjamin Wittes, a legal commentator with a large Twitter following, was on an airplane last month when the FBI raided the office of President Trump's lawyer, Michael Cohen. He spent hours unaware of the news, a fact that seems to have sparked a mini existential crisis. My first reaction was, if I had known about that, I would have boomed a baby cannon, Wittes said in an interview. Boomed a baby cannon? For the uninitiated, Wittes, a senior fellow at the Brookings Institution, likes to tweet out big stories with one-word commentary. Boom. Often with video of a tiny cannon blowing something up. Missing a blockbuster story had him worried about the credibility of the whole project. I grew concerned that the boom was going to lose all of its emotional and, for that matter, intellectual power, said Wittes, a former member of the Washington Post editorial board. If he were to elevate relatively small news developments but miss the biggest one, he wondered, who will trust the booms are booms? Every week, Twitter streams swell with stories that travel at whitewater speeds. The Russians met with Trump in the Oval Office. The president thinks America is filled with shithole countries. Former FBI Director James Comey has memos. Kanye said what? Phones buzz with email alerts, and television chyrons try to keep up with indictments. FBI raids and personnel changes. NSC Director Mike Flynn resigns. Secretary Tom Price resigns. EPA Administrator Scott Pruitt. Wait, has that happened yet? We've all got questions, and special counsel Robert Mueller has them too. In fact, he's got 49 of them, covering all topics from real estate deals in Moscow to Attorney General Jeff Sessions' decision to recuse himself from the Russia investigation, according to the latest report from the New York Times. Across the country, but especially in and around Washington, people are trying to figure out how to consume news when the news is all consuming. Every time news breaks, it means thousands of people look to their loved ones, to Twitter, to Slack, and ask, does this matter? Is this a thing? Is this a boom? I feel like I'm losing my mind sometimes, said Vivian Schiller, the former head of NPR and now a self-described news addict. Like everybody, I have all my alerts that come across my phone, said Frank Sesno, the director of the School of Media and Public Affairs at George Washington University. It happens like every 10 seconds, and every time something beeps, I look. I live in a world where before I go to the shower, I have to check Twitter, said Neera Tandon, the head of the Center for American Progress, a liberal think tank, which, if you recall from several weeks ago, was created by John Podesta. When you see a boom, it's me saying this is a really big deal, Wittes said. The problem with the methodology is I'm not sure I know what the threshold of a really big deal is anymore. Now, Benjamin Wittes, in this article, as it was sort of introducing to the Washington Post reader, Benjamin Wittes was cultivating an online following, and not just an online following. Many of the large progressive liberal side was following his account daily to try to find out what dots to connect any given day that would supposedly lead to the eventual ousting of President Trump. He was seen as a go-to resource. And we will find out why he was seen as a go-to resource. But those little cannons, he would post GIFs of tiny little cannons exploding. The idea would be that, you weren't going to take out Donald Trump with one of these tiny things, but if you fire enough of them, eventually you will take him. So, Benjamin Wittes, as an article from CBS News will explain, Comey was flustered by Trump. Friend of former FBI chief says. A friend of James Comey says that the former FBI director tried to maintain some distance from the White House despite President Trump's demand for loyalty, and says that Comey was skeptical of Rod Rosenstein before he was confirmed as Deputy Attorney General. The friend, Benjamin Wittes, wrote on his blog Lawfare Thursday night that he had lunch in Comey's office on March 27th. He says Comey shared information that Wittes is now questioning following Mr. Trump's decision to fire Comey last week. During the lunch, Wittes said that Comey had described at least 2 incidents that Comey regarded as the president trying to compromise him by demonstrating an image of closeness between them. One of those incidents, he said, took place just a few days after inauguration when the president invited law enforcement to the White House. Comey was standing in the room during an event and tried to camouflage himself, Wittes said, so that Mr. Trump couldn't notice him. He told me the story. He tried hard to blend into the background and avoid any one-on-one interaction. He was wearing a blue blazer and noticed that the drapes were blue. So he stood in the back right in front of the drapes, hoping Trump wouldn't notice him, camouflaged against the wall, Wittes wrote. So during the initial Trump term, in the very first few months, there was, which we'll get into, there was a lot of back and forth between Trump and Comey. And Comey used Benjamin Wittes and one other person to start the narrative campaign in the press about his eventual ousting, so that they could start to incorporate a larger shadow on Trump with respect to Russia. So the behavior here, in particular, weird quotes like this. As he told me in the story, he tried hard to blend into the background and avoid any one-on-one interaction. He was wearing a blue blazer and tried to camouflage with the drapes. Weird shit like that became sort of a draw to people who wanted the dramatics of this movie that they were watching, where Trump would eventually wind up being taken down. And this is where they started to get their first hook and started to latch on to Benjamin Wittes, because he was friends with James Comey and presumably friends with a lot more people in the intelligence community. So to look at the degree to which Benjamin Wittes and in conjunction with James Comey were basically manipulating the whole narrative from the start to finish, we do have to go back and talk about the sequence of events leading into Trump assuming office and the early months. And primarily, we just have to focus on Michael Flynn, because this paints the picture very strongly, both of Benjamin Wittes being a son of a bitch and James Comey also being a son of a bitch. So during the Trump transition, I'm reading some stuff that I pre-wrote because there's story, it has details that need explained. During the Trump transition, Flynn was going to be a national security advisor. And on December 29th, 2016, Barack Obama initiates the sabotage of the incoming administration with respect to Russia. So right after Trump was declared the winner, they started the campaign that says that he only won because of Russian influence. Hillary Clinton starts saying that he's an illegitimate president because the Russians manipulated the election. Depending on which atmosphere, she sort of bordered on saying that they actually hacked the voting machines without explicitly saying it. In other ways, it was just that they influenced it somehow, and that it was only because of Russia and Russian influence that Trump was president. But on December 29th, Barack Obama actually initiated a whole slew of retaliatory efforts against Russia in response to their abuse of our electoral system. So Today, I have ordered a number of actions in response to the Russian government's aggressive harassment of U.S. officials and cyber operations aimed at the U.S. election. These actions follow repeated private and public warnings that we have issued to the Russian government and are necessary and appropriate response to the efforts to harm U.S. interests in violation of established international norms and behavior. All Americans should be alarmed by Russia's actions. In October, my administration publicized our assessment that Russia took actions intended to interfere with the U.S. election process. Today, I have ordered a number of actions in response. I have issued an executive order that provides additional authority for responding to certain cyber activity that seeks to interfere with or undermine our election processes and institutions, or those of our allies and partners. Using this new authority, I have sanctioned 9 entities and individuals, the GRU and the FSB, 2 Russian intelligence services, 4 individual officers of the GRU, and 3 companies that provided material support to the GRU's cyber operations, et cetera, et cetera. Lots more sanctions and lots of individuals being cast out. So now Trump is the president to be. He's in the transition phase, and he has Michael Flynn call an ambassador to Russia named Kislyak. He has him call him because basically Obama, on his way out, just 3 weeks left in his term, January 20th was going to be the inauguration, right? He goes over and he just starts effectively a large, diplomatic controversy for Trump to now have to pick up. So he has Michael Flynn call this Ambassador Kislyak. And that was well within Michael Flynn's purview. There is no problem at all with Michael Flynn calling Kislyak. So the Obama administration at the time had Kislyak's communications wiretapped. And by protocol, U.S. citizens are supposed to be what they call masked in those communications, because supposedly the United States likes to adhere to privacy regulations, and it's not okay to spy on U.S. citizens without a warrant. So the person that Kislyak would be speaking to is what they call masked. Well, Susan Rice, who was the national security advisor for Obama at the time, ordered the name of the individual Kislyak was speaking to unmasked. She ordered this. And supposedly there is supposed to be a justification for doing so about some sort of national security threat that required you to unmask these people, etc., but she didn't provide one. So they determine that it's Michael Flynn. So Trump takes office, and 2 FBI agents go to talk to Michael Flynn, and they start asking him about this phone call. Now, they have the full recording and transcript of this phone call, so they know exactly everything that was spoken and everything that was discussed. So they go and they talk to Michael Flynn. And while there is no transcript of the conversation they had, over time, it's generally understood that he was telling them he didn't remember things about the conversation, but he didn't believe that he had spoken about these sanctions that Obama had put in. His purpose at the time was actually to call Kislyak and have ask Kislyak to ask Putin to not retaliate and just wait until Trump is in office, and they'll handle this. So these FBI agents go and they question him, and his answers don't match to some degree this phone call that they have tapped, but they don't, to my knowledge, tell him that they have it tapped. And immediately after that, the rumors start to spread that Michael Flynn had lied to the FBI and also lied to Mike Pence. And the controversy lasts in the media for a couple days. And Trump asks Flynn to resign, primarily for what Trump says is the crime of lying to Mike Pence. He says he can't have his people lying to the vice president. And the media starts laying on the idea that by calling Kislyak Michael Flynn has violated what was called the Logan Act. NPR says the Logan Act lingers for others in Russia probe. All eyes look to the Trump ladder. The Atlantic, did Michael Flynn violate the Logan Act? Now, if you're politically astute and you've been following this to any degree over the last, 8 years, and you were heavily involved or invested, you would know that the Logan Act is something that says that you can't, start to perform diplomatic functions as citizens in opposition to the United States aims. But you also would remember that there has never been a prosecution of the Logan Act since its inception, and that this legal theory was bogus, right? It was a legal theory that wound up being pushed in all of the press to pile on to the Trump. We're going to get Trump. He's going to be out of the office. It was only because the Russians were going to get him. He was in collusion with them. It was to pile on to the perception that there were crimes that they were going to get him for. So the Logan Act idea is being pushed over and over again. Eventually, Michael Flynn is charged with lying to the FBI. Okay, for his statements that did not align with the recordings that they have of him talking to Kislyak. And at the same time that Comey has Benjamin Wittes go to the media and start talking about how Trump wanted him to sign a loyalty pledge, and he was hiding from Trump in the curtains. He actually leaks memos to another friend to go to the press with, to talk about this behavior too. So we're going to go through the memos, because the memos are fascinating and really point to this this whole operation that Benjamin Wittes and Comey were pushing, narratively speaking, in the media. So one of the first articles that explains how shitty Comey was being with his behavior here. Comey thought leaking memo describing Trump meeting could spur special counsel appointment. So he had a specific intent of trying to further the Russia investigation by leaking these memos. So as we go through the memos, hopefully we will see something fucking alarming that justifies this special counsel probe. Former FBI Director James Comey told the Senate Intelligence Committee on Thursday that he took steps to get his version of a meeting with the president to the news media, believing that doing so might trigger the appointment of a special counsel. Comey said he wrote memos summarizing his interactions with President Donald Trump because he feared Trump would lie about the nature of the meetings. In those meetings, Trump asked Comey for loyalty, and he said he hoped Comey would let go of the investigation into former National Security Advisor Michael Flynn's contacts with Russia, Comey said in prepared testimony for the committee. We're going to go through the memos. On January 7th, so this is right before Trump assumes office, one of the part of the memo says, I said the Russians because Comey is now meeting and briefing Trump. I said the Russians allegedly had tapes involving him and prostitutes at the presidential suite at the Ritz-Carlton in Moscow from about 2013. He interjected, there were no prostitutes. There were never prostitutes. He then said something about him being the kind of guy who didn't need to go there, and laughed, which I understood to be communicating that he didn't need to pay for sex. He said 2013 to himself, as if to remember that period of time, but didn't add anything. He said he always assumed that hotel rooms he stayed in were when he traveled were wired. I replied, I do as well. Okay, so that memo establishes that they were talking about the infamous rumored P tape. And if you weren't familiar, there was a rumored P tape that was inside of what they call the Steele dossier by a man named Michael Steele, who was commissioned by the Hillary Clinton campaign to do Oppo research on Donald Trump. And inside of this report, there was a rumor that Russia was in possession of some tape in which Trump was in a Russian hotel room with two prostitutes, and they were urinating on the bed because it was a bed that Obama had slept in once. This is the rumor, and so there was some sort of tape involving urination on the bed. January 28th, Comey's memo. He touched on my future at various points. The first time he asked, "So what do you want to do?" Explaining that lots of people wanted my job, about 20 people. That he thought very highly of me and had heard great things, and that the people of the FBI really liked me, but would understand if I wanted to walk away given all I had been through, although he thought that would be bad for me personally because it would look like I had done something wrong. He said that he, of course, could make a change at the FBI if he wanted, but he wanted to know what I thought. There was no acknowledgement by him or me that we had already talked about this twice. I responded by saying that he could fire me at any time he wished, but that I wanted to stay and do a job I love and think I'm doing well. I explained that I never expected to be back in government, but I had found this job hugely rewarding and wanted to serve out my term. I added that I was reliable in one way, but not the way political people sometimes use the term. Now, I will remind you of this quote, but I want you to try to think about it as you hear the rest of the story. I explained to him that he could count on me always to tell him the truth. I said, I don't do sneaky things, I don't leak, and I don't do weasel move. But I was not on anybody's side politically and could not be counted on in that traditional political sense, which I said I thought was in the president's best interest. He asked whether the FBI leaks, and I answered that, of course, in an organization of 36,000, we were going to have some of that, but I said I think the FBI leaks far less than people often say. I predicted he, like all presidents, would discover the entire government leaks like crazy, and explained that it often comes from the first or second hop from those actually working on the sensitive thing. He replied that he needed loyalty and expected loyalty. I did not reply or even nod or change my facial expression, which he noted because we came back to it later. The conversation then swerved into a long discussion of the email investigation about Hillary Clinton. At about this point, he turned to what he called the golden showers thing, the P-tape, and recounted much of what he had said previously on that topic. He repeated that it was a complete fabrication and fake news. I explained again why I had thought that it important that he know about it. I also explained that one of the reasons we told him about the rumor was that the media, CNN in particular, was telling us they were about to run with it. He said it bothered him if his wife thought there was even a 1% chance it was true in any respect. He said he had spoken to people who had been on the Miss Universe trip with him, and they had reminded him that he didn't stay overnight in Russia for that, which would have been the 2013 event. He said that he arrived in the morning, did events, and then showered and dressed for the pageant at the hotel, and left for the pageant. Afterwards, he returned only to get his things and departed for New York by plane the same night. He said he thought maybe he should ask me to investigate the whole thing to prove it was a lie. I did not ask any questions. I replied that it was up to him, but I wouldn't want to create a narrative that we were investigating him because we were not. And I worried such a thing would be misconstrued. Now, Alex, I want you to say to me right now, do you notice anything missing from these discussions so far in Comey's memos?
I don't know, a lot. What's standing out for you?
There is no discussion that in these memos that Trump is concerned about in being investigated for any stupid fucking collusion with Russia for the presidency. He's focused on this goddamn P-tape.
Yep. And even the loyalty thing in context is like, he's like, people are leaking, and he's like, I need loyalty. I.e., I need people to not fucking leak what I tell them.
Right.
You know,
right.
Yeah. I don't know, man. Like it's
gonna get more interesting. So February 8th, 2017. This is before the Flynn fiasco blows up in the media. The president brought up. This is, again, another memo. The president brought up the golden showers thing and said it really bothered him if his wife had any doubt about it. He then explained, as he did at our dinner, that he hadn't stayed overnight in Russia during the Miss Universe trip. Twice during this part of the conversation, Reince Priebus tried to interject a comment about the redacted and why was it even in there. But the president ignored him. The president said the hookers thing is nonsense, but that Putin had told him that we have some of the most beautiful hookers in the world. He did not say when Putin had told him this, and I don't recall it redacted. Then February 14th, when Flynn resigns. Now, Flynn hasn't been discussed in any of these memos so far. He began by saying he wanted to talk about Mike Flynn. He then said that although Flynn hadn't done anything wrong in the call with the Russians, correct, he had not done anything wrong in the call with Russians, a point he made at least 2 more times in the conversation, he had to let him go because he misled the vice president, whom he described as a good guy. He explained that he just couldn't have Flynn mislead the vice president, and in any event, he had other concerns about Flynn, and he had a great guy coming in, so he had to let Flynn go. He then returned to the topic of Mike Flynn. This was after some other stuff that wasn't important, saying that Flynn is a good guy and he has been through a lot. He misled the vice president, but he didn't do anything wrong in the call. He said, I hope you can see your way clear of letting this go to letting Flynn go. He's a good guy. I hope you can let this go. I replied by saying, I agree he's a good guy, but said no more. March 30th. He began joking that I was getting more publicity than he. I replied that I hate it. He then said he was trying to run the country, and the cloud of this Russia business was making that difficult. He said he thinks he would have won the healthcare vote, but for the cloud. He then went out on a great length, explaining that he has nothing to do with Russia. He has a letter from the largest law firm in DC saying he has gotten no income from Russia. He was not involved with hookers in Russia. Can you imagine me? Hookers? I have a beautiful wife, and it's been very painful. Is bringing a personal lawsuit against Christopher Steele, the guy who wrote the dossier with the P-tape allegation. Always advised people to assume they were being recorded in Russia, and has accounts now from those who traveled with him to the Miss Universe pageant that he didn't do anything, etc. He asked what I could do to lift the cloud. I explained that we were running it down as quickly as possible, and that there would be great benefit if we didn't find anything to our good housekeeping seal of approval, but we had to do our work. He agreed, but then returned to the problems it was causing him. Went on a great length about how bad he was for Russia because of his commitments to more oil and more nukes. He said something about the hearing last week. I responded by telling him I wasn't there and I wasn't there as a volunteer, and he asked who was driving that. Was it Nunes who wanted it? Skip that part. I reminded him that I had told him we weren't investigating him, and I had told the congressional leadership the same thing. Now, this becomes important. So in the background of all this, there was no specific FBI investigation that was investigating Donald Trump in the sense that it would have been investigating Hillary Clinton for her email scandal. There was no active investigation. So he has been told this, Trump has been told this, that they are not investigating him. They have told him this in the background multiple times. And so when he's talking about Comey lifting the cloud, he's talking about all the media coverage that is continuously, compounding on him day after day, that, he was in collusion with Vladimir Putin to, rig the election and win it over Hillary Clinton. So Comey's here talking about, I reminded him that I told him we weren't investigating him, and that I had told the congressional leadership the same thing. He said it would be great if I could get that out, and several times asked me to find a way to get that out. So the FBI is being silent. So the DOJ and the FBI is not publicly stating that Trump is not under investigation, and therefore, given all of the media coverage, all the public perception can be is that he is under investigation. Particularly when you go back to the Flynn's, did he violate the Logan Act and the additional things with Russian meddling in the election. So now we go to April 2017. I returned the president's call this morning at 8:26 Eastern. We spoke for about 4 minutes, and he was following up to see if I did what he had asked last time. So we are now in April, and that was March 30th. So this is somewhere in April. I don't know exactly when, because the day of the month was awkwardly written. We spoke for about 4 minutes. He said he was following up to see if I did what he had asked last time, getting out that he was personally not under investigation. I replied that I had passed the request to the acting attorney general and had not heard back from him. He spoke for a bit about why it was so important. He was trying to do work for the country, visit with foreign leaders, and any cloud, even a little cloud, gets in the way of that. Because the foreign leaders would be expecting, to have this controversy unfold and not know if they'd be dealing with Donald Trump long term, or if he was the person they should be, making broad deals with, because his longevity might be stunted. So that's the last Comey memo. Okay, nowhere in these memos is anything particularly damning about Donald Trump, with the exception of this, one time asking him for loyalty, and in the sense of just saying, I need loyalty. The rest of it is about the P tape, and he asked him once to drop whatever they were doing with Mike Flynn because Flynn didn't do anything wrong on the call. And that's going to come back as important because Flynn didn't do anything wrong on the call. Now, the degree to which Comey was actively pursuing a sort of a sabotage comes to light in Comey's post administration behavior. So when he was let go, he went and wrote a book. And he then did a press tour for that book, and he started to let certain details slip, or maybe in fleeting moments of braggadocio, he started to show his schemy hand a bit. So, if you recall, at the beginning of the Trump administration, 2 agents go and they talk to Mike Flynn about this call. Mike Flynn was unmasked because Susan Rice unmasked him with no real purpose.
You look at this White House now, and it's hard to imagine 2 FBI agents ending up in the same room. How did that happen?
I sent them. Something I probably wouldn't have done or maybe gotten away with in a more organized investigation, a more organized administration. The FBI wanted to send agents into the White House itself to interview a senior official. You would work through the White House counsel, and there'd be discussions and approvals, and who would be there. And I thought, it's early enough. Let's just send a couple guys over.
So these 2 agents, Comey sends them to go interview Flynn without any official preparation. So they just sideline Flynn with what he believes is just a casual conversation. It's not an official interrogation. It's not an official questioning. There's just 2 FBI agents walking in up to him because Comey saw an opportunity that he himself says that he exploited. He just saw that the incoming administration was not paying attention to standard protocol, didn't understand standard protocol, and wouldn't make these agents go through the normal operating procedure to have an interview with a senior administration official. He just sends them. So Michael Flynn in this conversation is not even preparing to have a discussion about the topic that they're coming over to discuss with him. Now, Michael Flynn, at some point, pleads guilty to lying to the FBI. And the lying to the FBI was the only charge that he was convicted of. He was never charged with any crime involving the phone call itself. It was only what they would call a procedural crime. So it's a crime committed in the procedure of justice. So sometimes they call it obstruction. That's a specific charge, but this one is lying to the FBI. And Comey was still on his book tour, and he was giving various discussions about this particular aspect. And this comes back, this issue of the conversation that Flynn had with the agents comes back.
Last Friday, the House Intelligence Committee released an unredacted section of its final Russia report. It says that FBI agents never really believed that Michael Flynn was lying about his conversation with Ambassador Kislyak. You'll remember this is the conversation where they talked about sanctions, and he indicated to agents that they did not. Rather, the agents felt that he was confused. Did General Flynn tell agents interviewing him that his conversation with Ambassador Kislyak was likely recorded and that they should review that tape?
I don't remember as I sit here. This bit in the House report about the FBI not believing he had been confused or not testified falsely. I don't know where that's coming from.
Really?
That was never my sense, never the sense of the agents who interviewed him.
Okay. Did the Justice Department misstep in any way by prosecuting Michael Flynn because he appeared?
So she says, okay, like in response to that, where he says, I don't recall that. Well, Washington Post, Comey claimed he didn't tell Congress that FBI agents thought Flynn was not intentionally lying. So you got a whole bunch of double negatives in that title there. But in a letter dated May 11th to FBI Director Christopher A. Wray and Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein, Senator Charles Grassley quoted from notes taken by a career nonpartisan law enforcement officer who attended a March 15th, 2017 briefing by Comey. The agent quoted Comey as saying the FBI agents saw nothing that led them to believe he was lying. Grassley also quoted from the committee staff notes that agents saw no change in his demeanor or tone that would say he was being untruthful. The majority report of the House Intelligence Committee includes a finding that FBI agents did not detect any deception during Flynn's interview. As evidence, the report quotes Comey from a private briefing on March 2nd, 2017. The agents discerned no physical indications of deception. They didn't see any change in posture, in tone, in inflection, in eye contact. They saw nothing that indicated to them that they knew that he was lying to them. The majority report also quoted from a briefing given by Deputy FBI Director Andrew McCabe on December 19th, 2017, after Flynn pleaded guilty. The conundrum that we faced on their return from the interview is that although the agents didn't detect deception in the statements that he made in the interview, the statements were inconsistent with our understanding of the conversation, and he actually had with the ambassador. McCabe added, the two people who interviewed Flynn didn't think he was lying, which was not a great beginning of a false statement case. So, in the background, they understood initially that they had nothing to go on with Flynn because even though they attempted to bamboozle him, so they attempted to get him off kilter and catch him in something, because that's why Comey sent them over there, to just go and abruptly interrupt him with without any preparation. They didn't actually in private believe that he was lying, yet they then charged him as a department with lying to the FBI. So the same WAPO interviewer asks a follow-up question.
To be saying to people, hey, I don't remember it exactly, go look at the tape. It shows sort of a lack of intent to lie if he said such a thing.
He pled guilty and allocuted, which means explain to the court why I'm guilty. And I did this knowing it was wrong. I mean, any of you ever sat in a court and listened to what's called a Rule 11 colloquy, where the judge makes sure that you're guilty? People ought to get that transcript.
This will sound funny coming from a federal court reporter, an old court reporter, but is it possible to plead guilty to something that's the lesser charge when you're implicated in maybe some other things that are more worrisome? And that lesser charge isn't something that you actually believe you're guilty of?
Is it possible? Sure, it's possible. Yeah, so I can't say it never happens, but it strikes me as a very, very...
So he's discounting the idea that Michael Flynn would plead guilty to something that he wasn't guilty of. The ABC News, a year after, Flynn selling house to pay legal bills in Trump probe. Michael Flynn, a retired Army general and ex-Trump national security advisor who pleaded guilty last year to lying to FBI agents about his Russia contacts, has put his Virginia home up for sale to pay mounting legal fees, friends and family members told ABC News. Flynn's 13-year-old three-bedroom townhouse in Old Town Alexandria outside Washington, which he bought 3 years ago, was listed for sale in December with an asking price of $895,000, money he will use to pay his high legal defense debts, his brother Joe Flynn said Monday. That is a reasonable piece of information to suggest that perhaps he pled guilty to stop the bleeding of money he had in expenses defending himself. That is something that happens throughout the country, particularly at different levels of criminal investigation.
Comey's a lawyer, right?
Yes.
And he's been a prosecutor?
Yes.
And he doesn't know that people plead guilty to stuff that they didn't do?
Well, not when he's on stage like that. Come on.
Are you fucking kidding? Like, I mean, he's either functionally retarded or just what he is, which, fill in your own insult here. But like, yeah. I don't know. Like it's
now, mind you, Comey has personally dropped those memos, and I read the memos to you. I did exclude a couple paragraphs because they were going to be too long otherwise, but they were not. I did not materially leave anything out that would have made them more dramatic than what I read to you. And Comey specifically said he leaked the memos to a friend in order to get a special counsel. So he purposely took that action in order to increase the pressure on Trump with this Russia collusion bullshit without any semblance that the Russian collusion narrative would have panned out. So he knows that the president is telling him that he's under a lot of difficulty actually being president and performing diplomatic activities with other countries because of this thing. He's asking Comey to help him out and say, hey, look, can you tell people I'm not under investigation? Comey goes, I'll do worse than that. I'll get a special counsel prosecutor onto you now, just because I'm going to leak something to the press. Now, the memos were not leaked in full immediately. They were leaked themselves later. But the fact that his friend had received the memos and had like dictated to a reporter some of the contents, that was much earlier. So
did you watched the Gabbard hearing, right?
I did not.
Okay, well, for some reason, like multiple of her questioners were focused on asking her the question over and over. It must have been asked like 10 times. Is Edward Snowden a traitor? Because, of course, he leaked information, right? So he betrayed the country. And apparently, I did not know this. I'm just learning it now. We have information that a former head of the FBI was leaking information strategically, particularly to harm his boss, on stuff that he no reason to believe it was true. Yep. And he's in good standing right now, right, with a blob. Comey is like a fucking hero. He's on some boards and enjoying some, I don't know, some defense contractor sort of consulting gig, or what's the deal?
Yeah. So Benjamin Wittes is one of the people that he leaked to. He didn't give him the memos, but he told them basically the same contents and gave him a narrative to go to the media with. And Benjamin Wittes, in parallel to all of this, is basically corralling all of the wonks. So if you recall from the article I read introducing Benjamin Wittes and his tiny cannons, there were many powerful people who followed his account so that he could connect the dots for them. He would post an article that he would say is connecting a dot, and he'd post a tiny cannon. And that would be how they got their information daily throughout this process. So he was an active participant.
The dots, right? It's a synchronization point. It's like
yes.
This is what we're talking about today. So it's not so much tell me what's true, but it's more like self-fulfilling prophecy, right? But because by putting this out there and having people write about it afterwards, it becomes a canon because he's
controlling the narrative. He's participating in controlling the narrative,
right?
Particularly because he's already known to have insider info because he had lunch with Comey. He already has other reasons to be somewhat involved. I mean, he was a Brookings Institution alum and has the Lawfare blog wasn't created the same day that this all went down. So he has established connections. But the fact that he was one of the spawners of the entire story with Comey gave him even more of a central focus to all of the people who wanted more of this soap opera unfolding. So he had an extensive ability to control the narrative by telling them which news stories to pay attention to on a daily basis. So that's all going on while I'm describing this Comey stuff. So while Comey is the central figure, Benjamin Wittes is doing the narrative shaping in the back end, sort of in tandem. So now, May 7th, 2020, Justice Department moves to drop case against Michael Flynn. In court documents filed Thursday, the Justice Department said that after a considered review of all the facts and circumstances of this case, including newly discovered and disclosed information, the government concluded that Flynn's interview by the FBI in January 2017 was untethered to and unjustified by the FBI's counterintelligence investigation into Mr. Flynn. So he was being investigated for some other stuff, but it was completely unrelated to the question of his call with Kislyak, and that it was conducted without any legitimate investigative basis. So basically, as the conclusion when they're dropping the case, they're saying he was allowed to call Kislyak in general by the transition. He was going to be the security advisor, And he had permission to talk and reach out to contacts who he would be doing business with in his official capacity. There was no violation of any laws when he did that. So the only law would be lying to an FBI agent, but the reason for asking him those questions wasn't even predicated on an active investigation about him. So they asked him questions about something, and then they accused him of lying, even though the questions that they were asking him about had nothing to do with any cases that they actually had under investigation. And that is a requirement for having a penalty of lying to an investigator, FBI agent. You have to be lying about something that they're actively investigating. And that's on top of the fact that the agents themselves said that they didn't think he was lying. So it's just level after level of invalid bullshit.
Gator, I don't know if you've dug into this, but I seem to recall that the reason that Flynn settled was because they threatened his son, or something about, basically it was kind of a deal that they would let his son go if he.
There was some. You're correct. There was some talk about that. I focus on the legal expense because that's the most easy to prove. I don't know if I have evidence to prove the other thing, but I have also heard that discussion.
Okay. Well, I mean, we have a better basis than Comey had to open an investigation. So there's that.
So we come in and we start to tie Comey's assholishness up here, and we get to the end of the Mueller investigation, where, of course, we know that nothing was really found involving Trump and collusion, as expected. But then there was an Inspector General's investigation of the entire unfolding of the pre-Trump and early Trump era, involving all of the investigations that were taking place. And Chris Wallace corners James Comey in this aftermath, and we hear Comey react to some of the unfoldings from the Inspector General's report.
Former FBI Director James Comey. Director, welcome to Fox News Sunday.
Thanks for having me.
You have been taking something of a victory lap since the IG report was released earlier this week. The question is whether or not it's justified. Here are you and the Inspector General, Michael Horowitz, answering the same question.
Do you think this is vindication?
It is. I mean, the FBI's had to wait 2 years while the president and his followers lied about the institution. Finally, the truth gets told.
Does your report vindicate Mr. Comey?
It doesn't vindicate anyone at the FBI who touched this, including the leadership.
The IG says you should feel no vindication.
Well, maybe it turns upon how we understand the word. What I mean is that the FBI was accused of treason, of illegal spying, of tapping Mr. Trump's wires illegally, of opening an investigation without justification, of being a criminal conspiracy to defeat and then unseat a president. All of that was nonsense. I think it's really important that the Inspector General looked at that and that the American people, your viewers and all viewers, understand that's true. But he also found things that we were never accused of, which is real sloppiness. And that's concerning. As I've said all along, has to be focused on. If I were director, I'd be very concerned about it and diving into it.
Well, sloppiness may be a euphemism for what it is he found. One of his big concerns is the way the FBI handled the FISA applications and the warrants that allowed you to surveil Carter Page, who was a former foreign policy advisor to the Trump campaign. Again, here is what you said about the FISA process and what the Inspector General Horowitz said this week. Take a look.
I have total confidence that the FISA process was followed and that the entire case was handled in a thoughtful, responsible way by DOJ and the FBI.
We identified significant inaccuracies and omissions in each of the 4 applications, 7 in the first application and a total of 17 by the final renewal application.
17 significant errors in the FISA process, and you say that it was handled in a thoughtful and appropriate way.
Yeah, he's right. I was wrong. I was overconfident in the procedures that the FBI and Justice had built over 20 years. I thought they were robust enough. It's incredibly hard to get a FISA. I was overconfident in those because he's right. There was real sloppiness. 17 things that either should have been in the applications or at least discussed and characterized differently. It was not acceptable. And so he's right. I was wrong.
But you make it sound like you're a bystander, an eyewitness. You were the director of the FBI while a lot of this was going on, sir.
Sure. I'm responsible for that. That's why I'm telling you I was wrong. I was overconfident as director in our procedures. And it's important that a leader be accountable and transparent. If I were still director, I'd be saying exactly the same thing that Chris Wray is saying, which is we are going to get to the bottom of this, because the most important question is it systemic? Are there problems in other cases?
One of the central issues is the role that the Steele dossier played, which was Oppo research paid for by the Democrats, what role it played in getting the FISA warrants to surveil Page. Again, here's your version, and again, here's the Inspector General.
My recollection was it was part of a broader mosaic of facts that were laid before the FISA judge to obtain a FISA warrant.
And we concluded that the Steele reporting played a central and essential role in the decision to seek a FISA order.
Horowitz says it wasn't part, as you told Brett Baer, it wasn't part of a broader mosaic. He said it played an essential role in establishing probable cause. In fact, he says if it hadn't been for the Steele dossier, the FBI probably wouldn't have even submitted a FISA application that had been reviewed in April of 2016, or August rather of 2016. They decided not to do it. They get the Steele dossier, they do it. It wasn't part of a broader mosaic. That's what you.
So the reason that majority of that wasn't discussed in this, tale is because the tale here involved Comey's memos and Benjamin Wittes, and Benjamin Wittes is playing, propagandist on the side. He's connecting dots for people using his newly found attention. And Comey is, of course, on the other side, also, trying to promote the respectability of the FBI the entire time, saying everything was done by the book, and the book is great. The book is perfect. And oh gosh, you don't understand how thorough and careful we are, only to have it all crumble after the Inspector General and Mueller Mueller finds nothing, and the Inspector General goes, "This was terrible." Comey, of course, retreats to, it was just sloppy. Now, I want to remind you of the quote that I had from Comey. I explained that he could count on me to always tell him the truth. I said, I don't do sneaky things, I don't leak, and I don't do weasel moves. And I want to give you, as a closing for that, one of Comey's final weasel moves, which was an interview with George Stephanopoulos.
Did you believe his denial?
Honestly, never thought these words would come out of my mouth, but I don't know whether the current president of the United States was with prostitutes peeing on each other in Moscow in 2013. It's possible, but I don't know.
So if you follow my chain here, all of the memos have Trump caring a lot about this fucking B-tape and it not being true. So Comey has to wiggle that out there going, I can't say it's not true. It might be true. Oh, that's a weasel move right there.
You think? I mean, this is just to bring it a little bit back, but just to connect it to the whole thing, right? The people right now are screaming about the absence of decorum and the absence of sort of doing things by proper channels and yada, yada, yada. You had the head of the FBI sort of implicating the president of the United States in one of the most gross scandals of ever, if should such a thing had happened, on television, knowing specifically that the president cares about this and has provided him with evidence against it happening. Okay. And all of these same people were cheering that on. And now they're oh, but how dare, how can, whatever has happened so far with Doge or whatever, even compare to deliberately sabotaging, your country. I don't know. This is if treason means anything, okay, it's not a wartime. Fine. I'm not talking about the criminal statute version of treason. I'm just talking about what it means to people. You're betraying your job, your duty, whatever it is that you claim to be doing, or the person you're working for. You know what? I think the president should appoint himself as an honorary FBI agent, so that he can actually go after people for lying to the FBI.
Well, so this is well. Here's the icing on this cake. So the Bulwark had a podcast yesterday with Ezra Klein, and they were discussing the FBI. And this is going to tie a nice bow, Alex. Tell me if you can hear the little bow.
You can't just say the Bulwark, Ezra Klein, just as if it's people.
The FBI, there's a new memo to the workforce last night. Acting FBI Director Brian Driscoll disclosed he'd been ordered by Acting Deputy Attorney General Emil Bove to turn over the names of all FBI employees who worked on the January 6 cases. Driscoll could be removed as acting director at any point, and also fired from the Bureau. He's not eligible for government pension. Bove laid the groundwork for doing so by calling Driscoll insubordinate in a memo. So, I mean, the cash hearing is now next Thursday, or the cash vote, rather. But this feels inevitable that we have a night of the long knives coming for the FBI here in the next couple of weeks.
So I was just doing a show that was partially about this. Have you guys talked about the weird story of Driscoll yet? The Driz?
I mean, a little bit on the surface, but I'm confused.
This guy was
by
not.
It, to be honest.
So Chris Wray, former Trump appointee running the FBI, resigns, even though his term was not up because Trump is going to fire him. So they need an acting director of the FBI. They appear to make a mistake on the website because they're a bunch of fools. And they put the wrong guy's name, this being Driscoll. And because it would be embarrassing to say, we put the wrong guy's name as acting director of the FBI on the website, now Driscoll, who was not supposed to be the acting director of the FBI, is director, and they think to themselves, it's only going to be a little while anyway. Then...
Okay, maybe I'm coming around to your position on the rakes.
Because Driscoll is like not a soulless careerist who they have like chosen for this role. He goes like to the FBI quite directly and says, we are in the fight of our lives. We are not going to let them destroy this agency. I'm paraphrasing the emails he sent out. And
we have talked about those emails. Yeah.
It now becomes like a sort of meme inside the FBI, and he's got, sort of like, he looks like he just walked out of a saloon. He's like an amazing looking guy. He will be fired, I expect. But one thing that's happened, Benjamin Wittes you always know things are bad when you're reading Lawfare again, right? The website, like that's when things are bad.
We love Wittes. I guess we had a period of time when we had Wittes Wednesdays on here. It might be time to
that's when threat levels orange.
So that ties the whole nice bow. Just yesterday, that podcast comes out, and boom, they're giving me my closure to basically prove, since we can't go back in time and relive it, that all these fuckers were hanging on to everything Benjamin Wittes said during that time period.
By the way, just to give you the real bow on this, and it's forward facing, Wittes. So I've listened to a few hours of his podcast just because I'm just fascinated with the guy, not even knowing all this. He's looking for some kind of, and this is what he called it, a DDoS on the government that a lot of people can do, that is sort of individually legal, right? That they can all like trigger some action, like sending some kind of a letter or whatever, but like something that will like take resources. Deliberately to gum up the works, right? And he wants it to be viral so that, millions of people do it. That's what he's looking for right now.
Mm-hmm.
Just FYI, right? This is the level of operation we're talking about. Like, he's like, can 50 million, he's actually trying to find he calls it he analogizes it to the ice bucket challenge. Like a thing that somebody can do that will, take some resources away from the government that can go viral, and if enough people do it, it'll create like disruption. And I guess my punchline with all of this, I sure hope that some of these people get taken down specifically for disrupting an official proceeding.
That would be poetic.
Yeah. If people don't know, disrupting an official proceeding is a crime defined in the Sarbanes-Oxley Act that was passed to never have another Enron again. Because what happened at Enron is that their auditors, Arthur Andersen, were shredding their files in order to avoid being caught. Doing whatever it is they were doing and enabling Enron to do whatever they were doing. So basically, they said, look, if you get in the way of us, like auditing or like something like that, but like, prevent something from going on, that's, they called that disrupting an official proceeding. And it had jail time and whatever. And that was the law that was picked up to go after so many of the J6 protesters because they were quote unquote disrupting an official proceeding, though it's like they didn't stop anything from happening. They delayed it, but like you can sort of tell the difference between whatever there's like a riot. Take the worst interpretation, right? There was like some kind of a riot. People went in. They whatever. They delayed it by a few hours. Like that's very different from we destroyed the information that would be required to conclude this investigation.
Right.
In that sense, it's much more likely to much more like using BleachBit, say, on a server. Anyway, so but since now we are interpreting that to mean, getting in the way of the government doing whatever it wants to do, right, is disrupting an official proceeding. Yeah, I don't know, man. Like, it's all getting so very retarded at this point. It's basically like, you're incompetent. Wait, not that competent, right? Like it's like they want you to just be on that sweet spot where they can, play their part of the game and just kind of slow you down. And you get a few wins, and they get a few wins, and 4 years later, I don't know, Kamala runs again or something like it. But unfortunately, the game has completely changed, and I suspect it'll take them a while before they recover.
Oh yeah, it's going to be a lot of chaos. If this is going to be a good time for people if they want to comment or offer opinions on anything that we've discussed today, anything you think we've missed, or you'd like us to give our opinions on, or anything, go ahead and request, because we're hitting the end here. Jacob, you've been up for a while. Do you have any thoughts on the second half here?
I have a question for you guys still. What do you think is the percentage chance that the Doge team is going to find something that, like, obvious problems that any computer programmer should have caught years ago, that all our social security numbers are, sitting in the equivalent of a file cabinet somewhere?
I would put that, if you're talking about that existing somewhere, I would put the probability high, although the location may not be where the largest amount of vulnerable data would be. So I would almost guarantee you that we would find an instance of that. Horrible, atrocious security protocols or something like that, but not necessarily like, the FBI, you could just go to their website and go to one route, and look, you could just download everybody's taxes. Like something like that probably is unlikely.
I suspect that they've probably found multiple already, if I had to guess. And I say this just it's so hard to convey this intuition to people, but like, I have worked with code bases that were loved by coders that worked on them, but they were, it took a few years for the whole code base we were working on to come to something. And, by the time you get to the end, the earliest parts are just the earliest parts, and there's like the ugly corners and whatever. And I was freaking out about the security implications of what we were doing. And again, it was like very competent people, very carefully, very thoughtfully thinking through everything they were doing and code reviewing everything, yada, yada. A system like that goes from the days of COBOL, I don't know. I put extremely high probability that they've already found multiple critical vulnerabilities that would expose data. If they haven't even found traces of compromise.
There's going to be several differences. There's going to be vulnerabilities that would be internal, meaning that someone who is unauthorized to access something could access a treasure trove of information. And then there's the ones that are exposed to the broader internet. Now, the broader internet, you have somewhat additional protection to, not because the federal government's necessarily good, but because that attack surface has already been attempted to be penetrated by hostile actors day in and day out. And of course, bored white hats. So that attack surface has been scanned a whole bunch, leaving few places for there to be significant holes. Now, that being said, there's always new holes anytime someone does something new. One story I like was an FBI portal where you would submit information as like a tip line, and you'd put in your email address, and you'd get an email, saying that your tip had been submitted from the official FBI email account. And the hacker in question, I don't remember his name or even his moniker, but he had figured out that if you could change the contents of the email, because the contents of the email were unfortunately encoded inside of the web page itself. So you could submit, quote, a tip but you could have the return message be whatever you wanted. You could put someone else's email in there and change the return message, even though this was supposed to be a tip line, and the recipient would get an official FBI email sent from the FBI's servers. So everything the recipient would get of this email would check out. It came from the FBI servers. It's an official FBI.gov email address, etc. And you could say whatever you wanted. So this person, I think their usage was only for shits and giggles, but they did this. They were sending people emails from the FBI, with whatever they wanted to as the email subject. So there's threats like that can pop up anytime a new web page or a new feature exists that maybe not is access to treasure troves of data, but can still have consequences.
But I mean, even that can be escalated into access for treasure troves of data, right? Like if you have that ability, you can then send this to some employee and say, go to this form and enter your password or whatever.
Yes.
Boom.
Yes.
Now you've got the Secretary of Treasury's master password into everything. It's again the kind of system that allows that kind of form to exist. It's just NGMI. I don't know what to tell you.
Oh, yes. Well, that's the nephew who knew how to use Microsoft Access and could code in VB6. Yeah, they made the vital components for the entire department.
I don't know. I think again, this is why I'm telling people I'm sort of like putting out a broadcast that like people should be very, very careful with like taking strong anti-Doge positions right now, because these people are going to unearth unbelievable things. I don't know. I would bet very good money that things are going to come out that. I mean, we're already honestly. I think we're already shocked at what has sort of been emerging, but like they've literally just started, and they're working. I don't know, 100-hour weeks. So I don't know what it is that they're gonna find, but this kind of audit on this kind of government, I mean, it's just it's kind of at their mercy. Like honestly, that they will find unbelievably embarrassing things is mathematically certain. The only question is like how much of that are they going to publicize, how are they going to use that, or whatever, or what exactly are they going to find?
Well, this is the surprising thing for me, because Ezra Klein has been basically going for the past week, going on podcasts, including the one like on Bulwark, saying let them cook. They're going to break something. They're going to own it, and we'll catch them on that. Stop trying to react to anything they're saying. And my whole thing is, are you kidding me? Yeah.
I mean, all of their options are pretty poor at the moment. They don't have many legal ways that they can actually win. So if they're going to call anything a success, it's in them, expanding their email databases, right? Having new organizations that are created in the wake of the old ones decaying, and trying to get new people who are currently motivated to resist in any way possible. It's not going to be as many people as in 2016 or during that era, but there's still money to be had. And so if you can if you have futile endeavors, but you can curate a decent, newsletter, let's say, then you have some accumulated a little bit of power for the future game, at least from your standpoint. Whether or not you actually win nationally doesn't necessarily matter if you're attempting to establish yourself for the future, politically speaking. Position yourself. So I mean, I don't have any optimism for their chances to really succeed in their endeavors to thwart this in any way other than assassination or something like that. But there is still gains individuals could have in that environment.
I've been following the court cases pretty closely, including on Lawfare blog, which does come from the Brookings Institution. And the TRO that came out Saturday morning from in Manhattan,
temporary restraining order for those.
Yeah, wow. It was ex parte, meaning they didn't even notify the government, the federal government, that they were filing it. And it's like, are you kidding me?
So can you elaborate on that for people who might
sure.
not understand the consequences?
So when you file an emergency order with a court, you usually, the general thing is you have to give notice to the other people that you're filing. Now, what they did is, this is, I forget how many states, including New York, California, Wisconsin, Minnesota, right? They filed on a Friday night in Manhattan, probably because they knew who the emergency judge was, because there's always a judge on call, and they asked for what's called an ex parte order, which means that, hey, this is enough of an emergency. So, for example, let's say somebody is the victim of of domestic violence, and they go to the judge and they say, I need a restraining order to protect me against my husband or whatever, but please give it to me now, even before the other person has a chance to plead their case in front of the court. The judge in Manhattan, and this guy was, I believe, a Clinton appointee, or I believe a Clinton appointee. He enjoined every political appointee in the entire Treasury Department from having access to the payment information of the Treasury Department, that which apparently includes the Secretary of Treasury, without even giving the U.S. government a chance to plead its case and respond or anything.
So that's probably going to be overturned in due time.
Oh,
well, yeah, but again, it's all about coming up the works, right? If you start getting, a hailstorm of these things coming out of every deep blue court, every 3 days, that's kind of what a DDoS looks like. But I will say, I looked at this last night, and in the beginning, I was like, "Oh, come the fuck on! This didn't happen." And then I looked at the order that came out, and it's written in a very confusing way. But fucking hell, this is exactly correct. No, it blocked every political appointee. So basically what we're talking about here is that the judicial branch is stepping into the executive and saying the people that have been appointed by the president and confirmed by Congress cannot access information of the executive branch.
Well,
what?
I'll tell you one mistake I think Elon made, which is complaining about this order on X, because look, until they give you notice that this order has been issued, you're not bound by anything until there's some sort of notice, right? Somebody went into court in Manhattan and got an ex parte notice that I have nobody served me with. That doesn't require me to do anything. And I just think Elon, it would have been better off if they had just ignored it until at the very least they got served with it.
We don't know that it didn't get served, right?
We don't know exactly. I mean, I've been trying to follow it, but once the order came out, I am sure that's when the attorney generals from all those states let the federal government know. But it's also the weekend, and Washington D.C. is snowed in, and the question becomes: okay, some lawyer in the solicitor's office gets an order which is addressed to the political appointees in the Treasury Department. That doesn't go to Elon Musk. that could go to the two people on Doge who are employees of Treasury. It goes to the Secretary of the Treasury, but Elon Musk and the rest of the people, like, why are they supposed to be served with this order, which supposedly doesn't involve them at all?
I think there is a messaging philosophy here, right? I think it probably serves them to publicize that this has happened and how it's happened, and just to raise us think and make it difficult for any other judge to keep doing this. And just really make it stigmatized behavior rather than trying to work within the system, even if it costs them a few hours or whatever. Okay. It even instructs whoever, like if the Treasury Secretary I don't even know if the judge can even say this, but so the Treasury Secretary has to delete basically all of these people, which include the Treasury Secretary, have to delete all information that they do have already, right? Not only are they not allowed to be given access, but if they had been given access and they have gotten access to any information, they have to delete it.
Okay, let me give you a little trick for finding out what the most exciting things happening at the Supreme Court is actually happening. Look at the dissents from the grants of certiorari. So a grant of certiorari means that the Supreme Court is willing to hear a case. Now, when judges write a dissent, they are saying, no, I think we should have, or we should not take the case. Justice Thomas, for a long time, has been, and you have to realize, Justice Thomas has a whole army of former clerks who are now district and appellate court judges. And what he's been doing is he's been writing these dissents from denial of certiorari, which basically tell his army and any lawyer out there looking for the type of cases that he's hoping to get set up. And back in the first Trump administration, there were a lot of these nationwide injunctions that district courts were setting, so any judge anywhere in the entire country could decide to enjoin the entirety of the federal government. And there were cases trying to come up to the Supreme Court saying that this shouldn't be allowed. And there were rejections of certiorari by the Supreme Court, which Justice Thomas, I read several, I at least one, a dissent from one of these, where he basically lays out his entire thing of, no, we have to set limits as a Supreme Court on these types of injunctions. So they might be just setting up the ball for the Supreme Court to spike it.
Yeah, no, I can totally imagine that. In general, I think we don't appreciate the degree to which the war. This is an info war. This is not being fought over bureaucratic email. This is not being fought over. Whatever. I mean, all the things that Gator described, right, about Russiagate and Michael Flynn and whatever, all of that was fought over the airwaves. It was about what people thought, and that had real implications for real people ending up in prison or outside of prison or whatever. But first and foremost, the flag everybody needs to capture is perception. And this is why I think, I don't know if Musk is doing it for this reason or for some other reason, or because he has some, a set of principles he's working with that wash out to the same thing as I'm saying here, but in a more complicated way. But at the end of the day, I think this whole thing is going to be fought over tweets, pretty much. And it's wild. And thank you. This was, by the way, this was extremely enlightening. And if you feel like continuing to drop by our spaces and give us updates on this stuff, you're most welcome. This is, I think, basically, look, I have been preparing for a deluge. Deluge
is the usual pronunciation.
Sorry, this is one of those words that I have written a few times that never pronounced, and it always jumps. You think you know what to say, but then you're like, wait. Anyway, of information, and I have been surprised because the information is coming up at 10x, and I think what we need and what we want the space to be basically is a place where we're operating at a weekly cadence, so it's not like a quick reaction to what happened 2 hours ago. Most of the time, sometimes it is, but it's like the place where we kind of slow down a little bit and catch up to what the fuck is going on.
Well, I only got through like 20% of the articles that I had curated this week, so
hey, that's pretty high historically speaking.
We're not doing a great job, but yeah, I agree with you, Alex.
Yeah. So thanks for your contribution so far.
Well, everybody, the big game, the football finale is starting to air. So if you want to get on to that, I suggest you have, because we're going to be closing up this space. Thank you for sticking with us. I do appreciate. Go ahead.
One parting thing is, if people want to tell us if the new timing is better than the old one, and we have no obligation to take their feedback to heart, but we will read it.
Yeah, and if you have other feedback
or other feedback, any other feedback,
because I'm assuming everyone is enjoying things, but silence sometimes is not necessarily as interpretable. I'm seeing a lot of regulars in the listening audience here. We don't get so many people requesting to speak, but you're sticking around, so I have to assume that you're enjoying things. But still, some feedback would be great if you want to leave us some. So that either we can improve or stay the same. All right, everybody. I hope you have a great evening, and let's see if we can keep pace with the news for the next week.
Are you supportive of these onesies?